you may know, you should be a computer engineer. That's what's hot today. And I went back home to my mom and I said, I want to be a computer engineer because that's what's hot. And my mom said, that's not how things work. So if you want to be an engineer, you have to go figure out what it is, understand what the different disciplines are. And together we went on this journey so I can understand in completion the different facets of engineering. I actually enrolled in a summer program at the University of Illinois or explain to you over the summer the different types of engineering roles. They would bring in people that were doing those roles today so that you can get a perspective of the day in the life of that experience. And that's how I landed on industrial engineering, because I felt it was a great role, for me, a degree for me to pursue in terms of really looking at different types of problems and taking people and processes into consideration. And so I really took the opportunity to do that. So, for me, I always say that a lot of times people tell you that you are a product of my imagination, because I imagined that I could be an engineer, and everyone around me supported me and rallied me to find out what it is, ensure that I was curious, stayed focused on pursuing that dream. If I was only a product of my environment, I would not have been an engineer. So one of the things that I tell a lot of my mentees all the time is you should manifest the things that you want to be. Sometimes in the lives that we live, we can't see them, but we certainly can imagine them. And when we do, I believe that we can bring those to the forefront.
Wow, thank you for sharing that incredible, inspiring story. Sarah and I are early in career, so we wanted to know, reflecting on your early career, what are some unique challenges that you faced as a Black woman, but not only a Black woman, but a Black and Caribbean woman? And what does that intersectionality look like for you?
Yeah, this is a super interesting question. Look, I think, one of the things I said earlier, I think we often underestimate the film of confidence that we gain growing up in an environment where we see people in leadership positions that look like us. And I think for me, this has been very instrumental as I've built my career in a very white male dominated industry. But I'll also be very disingenuous if I say that I didn't have any struggles of my own, as well on this journey. And I think I've learned and I've gotten better over time. One of the things that come to mind is I would never forget, I was interviewing for an internship position my freshman year. And in the interview, the interviewer mocked me and made fun of me. He asked me, wow, like when it rains, like what happens to your hut? Does it just all turn into mud and you fall down? And he said, how did you get here? Like, how were you able to maneuver the sharks when you swam to North Carolina? And I'm looking at this guy and I'm like, wow, like I probably should be interviewing you and you not interviewing me. And at that time, I would say like I had a very, very thick VI accent, and he kept repeating in the interview, I don't understand what you're saying. Can you repeat that one more time? It sounds so hilarious. Say it one more time. Like I was a character in a movie. And I will be very honest with you, I literally went back to my dorm and I cried. I literally cried. But I wrote his name down. And in these times, typically companies would send sort of the exact same person for the interview. So I wrote his name down, and over that next semester, I literally like honed my skill set, and I actually learned how to speak in a way that actually he was not able to identify my accent. And I signed up for that interview, and then he was like, you are so amazing. This was maybe about 4 months later. You're so amazing. We want to bring you for an offsite interview. I went for the on-site interview, and as they were getting ready to offer me the job, I said, I would love for his name was Mike. I would love for Mike to come in. I'd love for him to be here when I accept this offer. And when he came in, I said, thank you so much for the offer. I really appreciate it, but I'm actually not going to accept the offer. Because when I didn't sound like you made fun of me and I wasn't good enough. But now that I do, I am good enough for you, but you're not good enough for me. And I say that right now with immense confidence, but I will tell you, I was 17 years old and I had zero confidence. But like my grandmother taught me, you have to stand up for yourself. So I knew in that moment that I needed to stand up for myself, but I was scared. This company paid for me to go for this interview. I had no idea if I was going to have to walk back to my university and to my dorm. But looking back, it was the best thing that I did. So I think it's super important to own your vibe. We are taught often to be cookie cutter. We're taught sometimes like we're not enough. And I think it's super important for us to understand what our differentiators are and for us to be vulnerable with it and to teach people how to treat us. I think in that moment, I wanted to teach him how to treat me and how to respect me. And even though I was scared to do it, I knew that it was an important thing to do that would be a huge level of definition for me as I move forward. And I think that, that sort of leads me to, I think the last point I'll mention relative to, I've always sort of built this perspective as traveling the road less traveled by. Growing up in St. Thomas, a small island, I always knew that there was a bigger world that was out there. And so I've always said, hey, look, I'm going to say yes to the things people say no to. Um, and like I said, I didn't grow up seeing engineers, mathematicians, and scientists. That was not the things that we talked about. But I was curious and I explored. I remember when I got an opportunity when I was working at IBM and I got an opportunity to go to China. I never forget the day my manager came into the conference room and said, we have this fantastic opportunity. Who wants to go? I raised my hand and I looked around and I was the only hand raised. And my team was like, yeah, Rashida, you go. And this was probably like 2003. So it was in the early days of globalization and international companies expanding their operations in Asia. And was it a tough experience for me? Like, absolutely. I felt a lot of times I was in Shenzhen, China, and when I would walk around, a lot of times I would feel like I'm a ornament on a Christmas tree because people would literally stop and stare at me. They would take my picture, they would touch my hair. But that experience taught me so much about myself and it taught me so much about teaching others. There was a day when I was walking for lunch with one of my colleagues and this little girl was I can tell, when you can tell someone is talking about you, I could tell she was talking about me. So I said to my colleague, Amy, I said, what is she saying about me? And she said, you don't want to know. And I said, girl, I have thick skin. I can handle it. Tell me. And she said, she's asking her mother, why are you so dirty? And I said, wow. I said, can you ask her mom if I can let her touch my skin? And so her mom said yes. And I went up to the little girl and I let her touch my skin. And she like touched it, like assuming like, I don't know, dirt was gonna fly off. And when it didn't, her eyes like literally opened and she touched my skin again and she touched my skin again. And I spoke to my colleague and said, just translate to her. She's a little bit vanilla. I'm a little bit chocolate, but we're the same. But in that moment, I took it also as an opportunity to I wouldn't have been able to give her that experience. I would not have been able to be vulnerable and have that experience if I did not travel the road less traveled by. So I think it's super important, for us to take those bold steps. And that's something that I've done in my career on a regular basis. I kind of put myself, through these situations where I'm forced to learn. Even my decision going to North Carolina State University and coming to Raleigh was that step of taking the road less traveled by. I had a lot of family that said, you should go to Georgia Tech because I've got a lot of family in Atlanta, or you should go, to school in Florida because you have family there. And I actually went to a state where I had no family because I wanted to make my own mistakes. I wanted to be able to learn. I wanted to open up my eyes to things that I didn't know that was not comfortable and train myself on how to be comfortable in uncomfortable environments. And so I think that those are the principles that sort of, help shape me. Those are some of the experience, good, bad, or indifferent, that shapes me. And I do believe that even that experience with Mike and the internship, as horrible as it may sound, it taught me so many lessons that has allowed me to be the leader that I am today. So I always say, don't run from the hard, lean into the hard, because those are always the moments that are going to give you the most character and the most resilience to take on the world by storm.
Wow. Thank you for that answer. It was really inspiring and kind of leaning into what you were speaking about. I want to get more into your career. So I
Okay.
personally feel like, based on my interactions, that the Caribbean has some of the brightest and most bold minds, and that we can accomplish almost everything that we put our minds to, especially you being a CVP of data and AI. So I want to know what your opinions are on the opportunities for AI and data in the Caribbean, and if you can share any examples that are inspiring for our audience.
Yeah. And one thing I just want to say, look, and I think it's interesting, and I don't even know if people know what CVP is, but it's called Corporate Vice President, for Microsoft. And it's a title. And, I think once, sometimes I tell people all the time, growing up in the Caribbean, and my parents still live in the Virgin Islands, and I still go there on a regular basis. I always say, like, being Caribbean, like your Caribbean culture teaches you how to be humble, because when I go home, like, no one in my family cares what a CVP is, nor do they want to know. I'm still in charge of the dishes for Thanksgiving, right? I still have to, like, sweep the floor. I still have to give undue respect to my elders. I can't walk into a house without saying good morning, good afternoon, or good evening. So I think, our culture just teaches us that we are not defined by titles. We're defined as being human. So that's the one advice I just want to say. I think as you all embark out into the world and you continue to build your careers, like, I think there's something enriching and super important around our Caribbean culture that differentiates us. And don't forget that, right? Because I think it's a level of authenticity and character that many people respect. Now, in terms of you prompted me to say that, because when you mentioned my title, look, one of the things I'll say about AI when we look at opportunities, I think one of the most things that we're seeing right now relative to AI is sort of the widespread and broad availability of the technology. As I mentioned, I've been in this space for quite some time. And one of the things I love to see is how it's democratized over time. If you look 10, 12 years ago, we didn't even have API platforms to be able to access the technology. You only had certain schools that were teaching the technology. It was much more of a resource conversation versus a commercial conversation. And so, but now we're seeing that it's integrated into our everyday lives, whether it's personalized recommendations, right, virtual assistants in online stores. And so I really love that it is being democratized, and that means that it has access to everyone, whether you are in China, whether you are in Italy, whether you are in Jamaica, whether you are in North Carolina, you're in Seattle, you have an opportunity to really leverage the breadth of this technology. And I think one of the things that I'm extremely excited about is education. I've seen fantastic, great use cases in the education space where it's bringing information to students and teachers, is freeing up time for teachers to be able to do, real work with their students, providing them access and information with things that, they would not probably have had before. If I look at even my experience of becoming an engineer, can you imagine if AI technology was there? Maybe I would have made a different, decision. I just happened to read this book, and I just happened to go to this library and get this book. But what if I had more access to information and points of correlation? Who knows? I may have made a different decision. So, I think that the technology really has the opportunity to really forge an opportunity for so many others to have access to information, to be able to make different decisions with that information. And I think that crosses socioeconomic status, it crosses industry, it crosses different perspectives. So I'm super excited, right, about what the technology can do. In my role, I really work with clients on implementing the technology. And I mean, it varies from everything from How do we deliver seamless customer experience? How do we allow employees to make decisions versus searching for information? That's actually one of the large use cases that we have, because believe it or not, even though we're in 2024, a lot of large enterprises still do things on paper, right? Or someone is reading a paper, someone is trying to get information off a paper, and then that information drives a business process. And so, a lot of companies are really looking at, how can I really change the way that I do that? How do we reduce repetitive work that's required, to respond to a critical task? How do we sort of transform a business model that will expand a customer base or service customers, differently? And so I think there's so many real and powerful ways. And actually, I was with a client in Toronto earlier this week, and one of the things he said to me, he's like, Rashida, I'm focused on the boring use cases for AI. And I said, what does that mean? Tell me more. And he's like, actually, there's so many things across people, how people do work, how processes are done, or how tools are developed, that we overlook. Like, when we think about AI, we just think about maybe an interaction, with the tool, but, there's so many things within my operation that I can do differently. And I thought that that was so powerful. And I think, like, when we think about AI, we should really think about it as fundamental. I think today we still think about it as something off on the side. It's only for a small process or a specific thing. And it's not. It really should be integrated and should be considered a mainstay in everything that we do. And I think, whether it's in the Caribbean or otherwise, really looking at the technology for the power that it is and the integration that it should have in terms of impacting people, processes, and the tools that we use is really how we're going to get significant amount of benefit and scale from the technology moving forward.
Thank you for that. I really agree that AI is such a powerful tool that more people should be using. So how would you say local communities in regions like Jamaica and the broader Caribbean can leverage Microsoft's AI technologies to enhance their daily lives and their professional endeavors? And what steps can they take to effectively utilize and integrate these advanced tools within their communities?
Yeah, one of the things I say is, like, let's make sure that AI is not technology tourism, right? I think that can relate to many of us, right? Like, don't just visit, like, plan to stay, plan to use it. If it doesn't scale, it's just an interesting product, right? If you're not building your skill sets, if you don't have an understanding, you're not there to stay, right? Think about it. When you visit someplace just for tourism or for vacation, you approach it completely differently than if you're going there to live. Right? You look at things differently, you explore differently, different things are important. So I think it's important for us to think about it in that way, which I think is super important. I think, when we look at AI, like, I like to say, there's this sort of phrase that I use is, like, think about it as the new IT. And what I mean by that is, 50, 60 years ago, when IT was sort of becoming as sort of the advent of things like databases and the mainframe, think about how it's changed over time, right? I mean, you have roles like the CIO, roles like the CTO, large IT infrastructure organizations, where today you look at that and think it's normal, right? Like, you think, of course, like, every organization should have an IT organization. Of course, every enterprise should have a CIO or a CTO. That wasn't, I wasn't here 60 years ago, but if you look at how technology has transformed over time, like, we've developed new ways of working, right? We've ushered in technology in terms of helping us do things differently. And I think it's super important for us to think about AI in that way. And while a lot of times it's portrayed as it's magic, right? It's not, right? It requires training, it requires expertise. Most importantly, it requires, data. A lot of times I like to say there's no AI without IA, which is information architecture. So where's your data coming from? How is your data managed? what is the life cycle, of your data. And so I think it's really important for us to take a little bit of a step back and not just be enamored with how exciting the technology is, but how do we scale it? How do we ensure that it's not technology tourism? How do we look at overall the readiness? Because AI solutions is an augmentation of a business process. It's a transformation of our business process. So ensuring that the organization, your users, you as students, you're ready and to be able to implement this technology is extremely important, right? I meet with a lot of leaders across different organizations. A lot of times, they say to me, hey, I just want to use Azure OpenAI, or I just, I want to do this without any really thought or perspective of like their business process. What is the outcome that they want to have? And so I think it's super important to look at organizational readiness, the why. Why do you want to do this, and what is the outcome that we want to have? Like I mentioned, data readiness, extremely important, right? I think sometimes people forget that, look, these systems feed on data. Like they get their juice, they get their fuel, they get their mojo, right? They get their freedom from data, which is super important. It's kind of like, I was explaining this in a family group chat, the other day. It's like, look, if you don't have the right data, it's like going to a Carnival Juve and there's no bands on the road. Like everybody is out there, but you're not going to have a blast. Like you're not going to have fun. It's going to be pretty dull and boring, right? Because you're not going to have an opportunity to while out. Like data is the exact same way, right? With these systems. So you can have the best, perceived algorithm. But data feeds the solution. So ensuring that you are aware of your data, you know where it is, you have the right data. You're also getting data from all different sources, right? And this is an area where I think, especially as people of color and Caribbeans, like we've got to lean into it. I've been spending a lot of time actually with my family on saying, hey, look, you got to learn about these. Don't opt out. You need to opt in. So I think one of the big things that we can do as, in the Caribbean is not fear these technologies, but understand the technologies and understand the value, of them. Because if we're not understanding, we're not opting in, we're going to be left out. We don't want our data. We don't want our perspectives. We don't want our nuances to be left out as applications are built and data is surfaced. So it's super important for us to understand this is not something that is being given to us and we have to use it. This is something that we are a part of, that we are going to shape, and we have to be significant contributors and users of the technology. Because I think a lot of times in the Caribbean, we sort of take this posture of things are better elsewhere, right? And we have to take the posture of AI from the perspective of, no, we are an integral part of this. We are this, and we've got to make sure we are completely represented through data, through enriching our skill sets, truly opting in, implementing the technology across different industries, across the board, so that we can build awareness, we can build applicability of leveraging the technology for use.
Thank you for that answer. And I'm really glad you touched on data-driven decisions and how a lot of the times the user is in charge of how the data is perceived and how that affects the AI. But as users who want to be more like tools for AI, what skills do you think, especially students like Destiny and I, will be critical for us to have for the future workforce? And how can educational institutions in the Caribbean prepare students for the evolving job market influenced by AI?
Actually, what are you studying, Sarah and Destiny? What are your majors? Sarah, what's your major?
I'm a computer science major at Howard University.
Okay, and Destiny?
I am a computer science major at Fisk University.
Okay, awesome. All right, you guys are super badass. That's awesome. Look, here's what I would say. A lot of times we think about this topic, someone probably in the audience to say, oh, this doesn't apply to me because I'm not a computer engineer. I'm not a computer scientist. Wrong answer. Right? One of the things about AI, if you listen to what I said a little bit before, that I like to say that this technology is an and, not an or, because you're transforming, you're leveraging technology and processes, you're leveraging technology in terms of how a person does things different. And a lot of times, actually, when I work with clients, where they get stuck the most on their AI implementations is actually not on the technology. It's not that the accuracy of the LLM wasn't perfect. It's actually on the organizational capability, right? Like the how versus the what. And so one of the things that I think is super important is actually, making sure that you build holistic skill sets, right? Really understanding end to end, holistically how things are done, right? And sort of a little bit of, I call it a little bit of management consultant, right? Because that's really the skill set in terms of really having a clear understanding of what is the problem that I'm solving for, and how do I fit the technology to be able to solve that problem and to be able to give the right benefit. And so I think one of the great things about AI is that it's not one skill set, it's not one degree. All degrees are applicable. And you're seeing this in the industry. You have a lot of companies in tech, that's saying, hey, look, we're open to, you don't have to go to X school, or you don't need to have X degree. We're looking for your leadership capability. We're looking for your ability to be a learner, right? What's your capacity to learn and to build new skill sets? We're looking for the experience, that you have. And I think that's super important. I think that opens up so many opportunities, because if you look at this space before, I mentioned this a little bit early on, it was only certain schools that had AI programs, and were talking about this. Now everyone is. I had a conversation actually with a leadership development firm yesterday that's doing some work with Georgetown University, and they wanted me to come in to talk to the Georgetown University law students about how to think about AI, right? Because they want to make sure that they understand how the technology works, how they should be applying it, or how giving them a broader perspective of how to take these things into consideration. So my advice is, relative to, look, I think that this is a technology that's teaching us that the what is important, but the how is just as important, and really looking at things holistically, being able to build skills around, helping determine a problem, helping to decipher a problem, helping to determine what measures of success are, helping to drive organizational capability, helping to be able to, build frameworks for value readiness is very important. So, a lot of times you will say, oh, I'm just an engineer. You don't want to say that. Right? Like you want to be, an engineer that understands the problem that is being faced and the best way to be able to apply the technology. You don't want to just build something that doesn't have shelf life. You don't want to build something that is not going to drive adoption, because with AI use cases today, again, back to, I'm going to be super repetitive, changing what people do, enhancing a process, building new tools. It is integrated in something. It's not a thing to the side. So you want to make sure that you are able to take those things into consideration and into perspective that would allow you to do your best work, have the best level of adoption, and have the best outcome.
Thank you, Rashida, for that. I liked how you talked about how you don't have to be a computer engineer to be like using and leveraging AI. So my question to you is, what are some common myths about AI, and how can we debunk them? Because I know there's a lot of things going around, oh, AI is coming for a job. So how do we go forward with that?
Yeah, look, that's a good question. Look, first thing I would say is, look, I think we've got to remember that we've ushered in technology before. Like, we know how to do this. For whatever reason, I don't know if it's the word artificial intelligence that gets people all spooky, and maybe Hollywood is doing a good job of driving our creative juices. But look, we know how to usher in technology. Think about the internet. When the internet first came out, right? We had to learn. Think about our, these things like my cell phone that's sitting here, right? I mean, I remember the first cell phone. Like, I mean, if you remember how it looked, it was pretty clunky. I remember, the transition even before the cell phone, where you had a pager and someone would page you, and you got a number, and you had to find a payphone or go home to your landline. And look at us now. We can't live. If I leave my house without my cell phone, I'm turning back, right? Because I need it. Sometimes I don't even know how to get somewhere because I've sort of trained myself not even to pay attention anymore. I just use my Google Maps, which is bad. Before, I wouldn't do that. I would pay attention and where did I turn left? Where did I turn right? Is there a coconut tree on the corner, right? Like look for landmarks. I don't do any of that anymore, right? I just live by my phone. So I think part of it is that we have to sort of understand that, look, AI is like any other technology. And we, as a society, as a human society, we should be proud of ourselves. Like we know exactly how to do this. I think the other thing is technology can never replace the nuance and elegance of human connection. Like, let me say that again. Technology can never replace the nuance and elegance of human connection. So I do not believe in the myth, right, of that, oh, like the world is going to come to an end and AI is going to take over. No, I truly believe that AI's ability to do the things that it does, allows us as humans to augment our own performance. I'm going to be better. You're going to be better. Our society is going to be better because of it. That's the beauty of it, right? And so I think this concept that I mentioned earlier of, let's not think about this as technology tourism, but so don't visit it. Don't think it's interesting. I tell companies all the time, don't implement this in an innovation lab. Like, no, this needs to be integrated in your core IT operation. It needs to scale. It can't be something that's interesting. So we have to get rid of this notion and myth that it is so different that it's not on Earth and it's on Pluto. No, it's on Earth. We've got to integrate it. And the more we integrate it, the more we're going to see that we'll be better. The things that we do will be better. The things around us will be better based on the technology.
Thank you so much. Shanique, is there time for audience Q&A?
I don't know if they can.
I don't know if they can hear us.
We have 7 minutes.
Okay. Will you be taking any questions?
I'm happy to take questions from the audience if they would like to do that.
I have a quick side.
Yeah, go ahead.
So you said you're going to Georgetown, and that's in DC, right? Georgetown in DC?
Yeah, yeah.
You should stop by Howard.
I
Yes.
love it. I love it. Assertive leadership. That's exactly. See the opportunity and take it. And look, that's a good point. I love that, Sarah, right? Because I tell folks all the time, it's like we have to always capitalize on every opportunity that we have and lean in. I think sometimes not everyone gets the opportunity. But when you do, you've got to lean in and you've got to take it. So I love that you do that. So once I get the date finalized, I will let you know. I can stop by Howard, or we can do lunch.
Yes, definitely. Okay, back to the questions. I just had to take the opportunity. Thank you.
I love it. You're a woman of my heart. They said we have a couple of questions, so you guys want to help us with a couple of questions?
Yes,
Tell
we
us.
have a question in the room.
You want to put it in the chat, or we can't hear the room at all, so
Hear the room?
you're gonna have to direct us somehow.
I think
So
Shane.
Tish is
can
our
you?
host. Tish is our host, so I'm hoping that she can help facilitate. Do we have any audience
Yes.
Q&A, Tish?
Can you all hear me online?
Now we can.
We can hear you now. We weren't hearing you before, but we're hearing you now.
Okay, excellent. We do have a couple of questions in the room. I'll let you go ahead and start.
Oh, good morning. So, my question is, how difficult, in your opinion, would you think developing an AI would be?
Developing an AI application, it's actually not difficult. I mean, the great thing right now is the technology is so accessible. I mean, you can go on the Microsoft platform is called Azure, so Azure AI, and we have many different services. We have our generative AI, Azure OpenAI service. We have speech to text services. We, have cognitive services that does a lot of our, NLP. And so you can, leverage those services. You can sign up for a subscription, and you can actually play with the technology yourself. So it's very simple to be able to do, much more so than it has in the past.
Thank you. Next question.
All right, hello, good morning. My name is Jodel Williams, and the question I wanted to ask is, when we look at AI and technology, we always tend to look to the future, look to schools, how best we can implement, but we have to understand as a society there are persons who would have either left that space or weren't able to go into that space. Persons who are in society already and wouldn't have experienced school. So now that we are speaking to innovating society as a whole and moving forward with AI, how are we going to, for lack of better words, integrate those persons who aren't able to get this type of education that we are privileged to get at the schools and universities? How are we going to kind of incorporate them into the learning process? And I just want to hear your opinion on that. How are we going to incorporate the wider society?
Yeah, look, I think I would sort of mention it the way that I mentioned a little bit about the cell phone, right? Like when we think about the cell phone, like what did we do to bring people along on using the cell phone? I mean, 2-year-olds can use a cell phone. My 77-year-old aunt knows how to use a cell phone. So I think we need to think about this a little bit differently. I mean, given the fact that the technology is much more democratized, it's available to everyone. Anyone can go and access Azure OpenAI. Anyone can access ChatGPT, there's a lot, right? Google has Gemini, right? And so the technology is pretty widespread. So, part of it is we've got to make sure that we're opting in, right? Number one, just like we opt in on using our cell phone and all the apps, that level of opting in and using the technology, because you learn by doing, you learn by using. And so I think we haven't done that. We've sort of looked at the technology as something super special, super exclusive, and it's not. Like literally, I have a 77-year-old aunt, like literally she uses technology every day. And why is that? Because in my family group chat, I said, guys, like you better get on this, right? I started educating them on the benefits of it, what they could do with it. For those that use Microsoft, I have an M365 application where they use PowerPoint or Word. I taught them, hey, look, there's this feature called Copilot. Here's what you need to do. And so I think it's really important for us as well to make sure that we provide a level of comfort to our community and to our families in terms of how to use and leverage the technology. And most importantly, not think about it any drastically different than we thought about everything else. We know how to usher in technology. So when we look at how do we bring everyone in the masses on and learning this technology, think about how did we do it with the cell phone, right? As it says, how do we do it with Facebook? How do we do it with Instagram? It's no different. I think if we take that barrier away from technology adoption, we're going to see a much, much larger level of adoption and acceptance.
Thank you. We do have another question if we have time for them.
Sure.
Okay.
Good morning. Can you hear me?
Yeah, good morning.
Okay, good morning. You mentioned earlier how as Caribbeans we tend to think that it's better elsewhere in foreign. What do you think is better for us as the people in the industry to stay here and to help develop in Jamaica or in whichever Caribbean country, or if we should go join the industry elsewhere and like explore and meet different people or other things like that? What do you think is best for us personally? That's my question.
That's a tough question. So here's what I would say. I think, look, it depends. And I think like you have to assess what your opportunities are. I get asked all the time, like why I didn't move back to the Virgin Islands. I actually got a pretty large scholarship from the local telephone company when I went to college, but there wasn't a job there that was suitable for me. right? So the path that I have taken is, I have leveraged experiences elsewhere, but I bring my experiences continuously back to my community. I do mentorship. I have a scholarship, for students as well. I do a lot of mentoring. I provide a lot of visibility to make sure students understand what their options, are. And so I'm not the person that's going to say that you need to stay where you are. I'm not going to be the person to say you need to go. I think you need to evaluate that based on what you have to get out of it. At the end of the day, you got to walk in those shoes, number one. Number two, you have to make sure that you are the most competitive. And I think number three, you have to put yourself in a position where you can live a life of significance. And when I say that, for me, there's a difference. When you live a life of success, it's all about you. It's all about what you do. When you live a life of significance, you live a life where what you do impacts positively the lives of many others. So from my perspective, I make sure that I give myself the opportunity, exposure to ensure that I have more to give, that I have more to offer, and I change the course and lives of many. Right now, I've started, for example, a endowment at North Carolina State University specifically targeted for students from the Virgin Islands to be able to go to North Carolina State and get a fully funded education, because I wanted to create a pipeline of opportunities for them as an option, because in most cases it wasn't an option. I just happenstance found out, but that opportunity changed significantly my life. And I wanted them to know that this is an option. And if they choose it as an option, I'm going to help fund their education so that they can open more opportunities. What they decide to do thereafter is totally up to them. So I think it's a personal decision, but I think for me, I've guided myself on how do I put myself in the best decision to be authentic to who I am, continue to represent my Virgin Islands flag, and continue to insert myself and be in my community to take my community to higher heights.
Thank you, Rashida. We want to be mindful of your time. There's one more question in the chat if you don't mind answering it.
Yeah, take one more question and then I've got to run.
It says the Caribbean is trying to be more current with technologies, but new technologies mean new vulnerabilities and they need more security. And I think sometimes we forget that and then get breached. What would be some recommendations you have to ensure the safe use of AI and data security?
Look, I think this is not a Caribbean thing. This is something that we're facing across all industries, even here at Microsoft. We've been really focused on security first and security as a fundamental. It's not how fast we develop code. And so I think making sure that we have a premise of really ensuring that we build resilient applications, we build secure applications, and that's a fundamental principle across everything that we do is going to be super important. That's something actually that we're doing. We sort of landed what we call a secure future initiative that's really focused on that. It's public, you can look it up in terms of what we're doing, but even we're recognizing that it's super important for us to make sure that security is first, it's embedded. We're guiding our customers to do the same. And I would say the same premise says. And one thing I would say is my last parting words is I would say, a lot of times we say, look, I say this with all love and perspective, right? Because I do believe I'm a little bit different, coming from the Caribbean, and maybe a little bit better too, coming from the Caribbean, because we're just like that. But I think also changing a little bit that perspective is that we're so different. Like, we should think about ourselves as equal, right? Like, we are equal. We're not less than, we're not a little bit different, we're not more vulnerable or less vulnerable. Like, we need to make sure that we put ourselves on the same big stage as everybody else, because that's what it is, right? Like, these technologies, it's not going to work any different in New York than they're going to work in Kingston, Jamaica, right? And so I think part of it too is us creating our mojo, us having that confidence and us having that perspective that we are enough, we are part of this conversation, we are just as impactful, and own it. And I think there's a level of owning that and a level of perspective that we have to have so that we're not taken advantage of. We're looking at things holistically from the right perspective. And I think when we do that, it changes fundamentally the conversation and the outcome.
Thank you so much, Rashida, for sharing your inspiring journey and your valuable insights, your perspective on AI, the Caribbean's future, critical skills, and showing us how to show up as your true, authentic self in spaces even when we're uncomfortable, to not run from the hard, but to lean in it with it, has all left us so empowered today. So on behalf of the Project Blue Mountain team and everyone here, thank you for your time, your wisdom, and for inspiring us to reach new heights. And thank you everyone in the audience for joining, and enjoy the rest of Microsoft Day 2024.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you so much. Thank you, ladies. Thank you, thank you, thank you. All right. Okay. How did you guys enjoy the session? Good? Yeah? I'm sorry we weren't able to get to all the questions. I was telling this young lady that within corporate, there's something called a hard stop, which means that I absolutely cannot go past the timeline because I have another meeting that I either need to prepare for and go to. So Pierre, of course, he was in person, so he offered that flexibility, whereas she's online, so she kind of has a hard stop, so she has to prepare for her next meeting. So we can take down your questions and potentially get it to Rashida if you guys still have like some burning questions. But we do want to prepare you all for the next portion of the day. So hopefully you all can see the schedule. This is where you all are going to break out into your lecture rooms, if you will. So some of you all probably received a form about a week and a half ago where you could select a pathway. One is more so focused on co-pilots, which are AI assistants, leveraging generative AI. The other pathway is AI, it's just an AI workshop where you focus in on neural networks and deep learning. So there's two pathways, if you will, that you can take that will be hosted in two rooms. They'll be in lecture room 47C3 and lecture room 47C4. Where are my student volunteers at? Abigail, could you all come to the front, please? Thank you, thank you. So your lecture, so some of you all have been training since June, right? Technical trainers with Bobby Russell, Robert, Ralph. You guys kind of been learning for a couple of months now. You're going to see some of that work be manifested today. So if you all could maybe, if you haven't selected your pathway, you probably need to come up here and review it. You can walk up now while I talk and like review the pathway options, because in a minute, we're gonna need you all to take your stuff and head over to the lecture room. So we want you to have a general understanding of what each pathway offers you. So feel free to come up here and review the pathways so you know which direction to go when you go to the lecture room. Unless you all can see it from your chairs. If so, you have great eyesight, but you're also younger than me. And does anyone need